right, awesome. Thank you all in the chat. I think it's a tradition of where we are with things that every event we do, every time we get on a Zoom call or whatever, we're having to figure out a new set of technical challenges, and we're scrambling a little bit over the past 10 minutes to figure this one out. So, but I think we got it. Oh, excellent. Thank you, Lily. Appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you for coming by our session. We're going to talk a little bit about modern data architectures and observability and data consumption governance. This is kind of a hot topic in the data world. We are rushing to put more and more data in the cloud, and we are rushing to democratize that data and give more people access to it. All of that is wonderful, but obviously that brings with it some new governance challenges. So I'm going to jump in. Let's see, how do I advance this? I'll do it right here. All right, so that's me. I'm the speaker. I'm the VP of Product and Marketing at Alter. Alter is a data security as a service company, so you can think of us as a company that provides observability, control, and protection of data as a service. So we are kind of a modern approach to some of these things that you're more familiar with in terms of governing data and protecting it. So I'm going to talk, but this isn't an Alter pitch. I'm going to be talking about the space in general and what the challenges are, what some of the things to think about are. So data in the enterprise. None of this is going to be unfamiliar to anybody that's on this session. We have all this data that we're generating, that we're getting from our applications, that we're buying from third parties. We're storing it in a data warehouse or data lake, often in the cloud now. And then we're running BI analytics and creating fueling the data-driven enterprise this way. DBMS in the cloud is growing dramatically. We all know that. And the other thing that's happening right now is everybody's working remotely. This thing we're doing right now is the new normal, right? And so what we're seeing though is that cyber criminals, people that want to steal data and gain from it economically, are taking advantage of this and in the gaps that are left by everybody suddenly going remote. So that's, the risk is going up also, given kind of what's happening with us. So let's talk a little bit about data warehousing in particular. We're going to drill in on that and talk about how it's changed. Again, I'm probably telling you things you already know, but this is things that have changed a lot in terms of what's possible. And the data warehouse as we know it has changed dramatically. And now we have these cloud data platforms where you can swipe a credit card and have a data warehouse instead of a 7-figure entry-level price tag that you used to have at your company. Individuals or small teams can have their own. It's not a big project with big infrastructure. The data can be highly unstructured. You can just throw things into a data lake and use advanced tools to analyze it. Whereas before, it had to be highly structured, very intentional. So this is all simplified things, and it creates a lot of speed and agility in data warehousing, but governance and oversight of data access can become a challenge because there's so many people jumping in to leverage these resources and sometimes in a not very controlled way. So let's talk a little bit about what data is sensitive. And this is a big question that I don't know that I think it's key to take a step back and think about it. Oftentimes people are like, oh, okay, well, it's sensitive based on regulatory regimes. So, is it GDPR? Has that told me that it's sensitive, or is CCPA telling me that it's sensitive, or other regulations and regulations to come? The problem is that it's a little subjective as well, in that if somebody learns that you have their data and to them that's creepy or weird that you have that data, or they don't want you to have that data, they can still contact a regulatory body and cause you problems. So you kind of have to put you have to put yourself in the shoes of the people whose data you're using and think, is the fact that I have all this location data from somebody's mobile phone, would they be okay with that? Would they be okay with the fact that it's not anonymized, or that you could figure out who it is based on the information that's here? So I think that it's good to take a step back and come up with your own guidelines for what's data sensitive. Don't just rely on regulators to tell you, because you might still get in trouble. And so it's good to bring in expertise, bring in your chief privacy officer, bring in people that can tell you beyond the regulations what you should be concerned about. And it's good to do this and then look at your data and then look at what you have and use this measuring stick against it. So let's talk about the traditional approaches to access governance and why some of them have challenges. Again, democratization of data is great. It's wonderful to be able to design data products that you can give the business access to, and you don't just have to take their questions and provide them answers. Not everything has to come through you anymore, as somebody working in data science, and that's great. However, when that happens, some of these things, there's problems that happen. So there's 3 layers here that we look at when we talk about governing data access. So the first is identity, right? I want to authenticate you. I want to make sure you are who you say you are. However, credentials are often shared. Maybe somebody needs access to that Snowflake repository, and you just want to give them a view and let them check it out. Well, here's my username and password. Just check it out. Passwords can be weak. They can be compromised in a variety of ways. So you get into the second layer, which is data resource access controls. And this is linking things to your identity, saying, okay, Joe has access to this part of the data resources, but not these other data resources. So you're kind of minimizing what they have access to based on what they need access to. That's a great kind of idea in concept. It's very difficult to maintain in practice. Access gets complicated with people moving in and out of different roles, people moving in and out of your organization, new data coming on the scene. It's very difficult to maintain access control. Oh, and by the way, if the identity is compromised, they're going to have access to what they have access to anyway. It doesn't stop them. So what you get into this third layer, which is you're getting into kind of increasing levels of sophistication here. This third layer is the idea of looking at each query that somebody runs, at each request for data that somebody makes, and implementing consumption controls. And what that means is, what are their normal patterns of data consumption? And is this abnormal? And if so, how abnormal, and should we stop it, or have somebody at least approve it? This is like your credit card. If you have a credit card, and it's what financial services and credit card companies do today, right? They track how often you charge, how much you usually charge, where your charges usually come from geographically. And then if something really weird happens, like somebody, like let's say you live in Albuquerque and somebody suddenly drops 30K on your credit card in Europe, your credit card company is going to stop it, and they're going to stop that in real time. So that's consumption control, right? That is the kind of real time control of consumption, and it doesn't depend on identity necessarily. It doesn't depend on you being who you say you are, because credit card companies assume that your credit card's stolen, and that it might be you that's charging, but it might not be. So they pay attention to your consumption patterns to improve security. So these 3 layers are all necessary. They're all something to look at and consider, but you should think about controlling consumption and watching that at the query level. So how do you do that though? What is it impractical? I think where everybody jumps to is, well, I can't really establish a pattern for people, for my data scientists. Like, they need access to everything, and they need to be able to run as big a queries or access as much data as they can, because they're data mining, they're exploring, they're figuring out new relationships between data. But what really happens in practice here, right, is that data scientists do need that kind of trusted relationship to data because they are exploring. But then there's this evolution of insight, right? When you find something as a data scientist, then things start to move to the right. And what you want to do as you democratize data, right, is you want to increase the number of casual users that you have using your data products. You found something in the data that's useful to use on a daily basis and watch. And so you build these data products and you expose those data products to a far larger group of people. So it's good to look at and think about, and for that larger group of people, for the casual user, their consumption is much more predictable, right? So I think when you think about risk and you think about data being compromised or exposed, the risks are to the right. That's where the risks are. And those risks are easier to understand and easier to predict and easier to control. So that's where the opportunity is for access control and consumption control, is on the right side here. You don't want to limit the people on the left, but as you move to the right, you can start to put controls in place. And that's really what you want in order to free access to data, but also do it in a way that doesn't increase your risk. So, you know, we at Alter, we use a lot of metaphors from the financial services industry, because they've done a lot of great things to control cash, and you have to think about data like you think about cash. And so there's lots of things you can borrow from the financial industry in terms of like techniques for, and I just gave you a credit card metaphor, but the other metaphor that's really useful is this idea of an ATM. An ATM does not trust you. You walk up to an ATM, you have to identify yourself. The ATM has a camera pointed at you. You're being observed at all times. You have limits for what you can access in terms of how much cash you can withdraw at one time. And then if you withdraw cash and you walk away and you say, oh man, I didn't quite get enough, I'm going to need, you know, a little bit extra for that thing I have to buy. You walk back, you have to do the whole thing again. The ATM doesn't trust you in between transactions. It looks at every single one and takes a zero trust approach to you. So you can do this with data, right? You can observe who, what, when, where, how much data is being consumed and what's normal. And then you can govern that consumption. You can mask, slow down, or block data requests. So there's lots of different ways to limit data access in real time if you don't like what you're seeing. And then of course you need to protect it. So you got to close all the side doors and the back doors to your data. And so if you have a governance model, you need to force everybody through that. And the way that you do that typically is by obfuscating the data in some way at rest. So maybe you're tokenizing it, maybe you're encrypting it. You're doing something to it so that if somebody has direct access, they're not going to get any data if they have to come through the front door. They have to come through the governance model. And so that's how you create kind of an airtight governance model, is by closing the side doors and the back doors there. That's it. I know this is short. I think we're at 15 minutes and we have 5 minutes left, but I would encourage you all to obviously what I just presented is philosophically, it's the direction we come from as a company, Alter. So I'd encourage you to stop by our booth, learn more, learn how we do this, learn how we approach this with our own products, and ask any questions of us. And then of course we have a live demo tomorrow, so you can come back and have a similar presentation by Pete Martin, our director of product marketing, who has a face for TV and a voice for radio. He's the full package. So I encourage you to come back and see what he has to offer in terms of giving you insight into what Alter actually does.